Welcome to week 8. We are studying Islam and East Asia this week. So we have a very busy week, really interesting week too, but busy. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to talk about is about Muhammad. He is the prophet of Islam. He was born about 570 CE to a merchant family. However, he was orphaned as a child, but does marry a very wealthy widow in 595 and works as a merchant. So he is raised in a house and raised in a society where paganism is very common, as well as Christianity is common, and Judaism is practiced around them very often. So we're going to see the spiritual transformation is going to occur in 610 when Muhammad gets his first visions. It is the archangel Gabriel who comes down from heaven to speak to Allah, to speak to Muhammad from Allah, who is the same angel that talks to the people in the Bible. So keep in mind, we see a connection there. Allah tells Muhammad that he is the God, the one God, and he creates a monotheistic religion based around him that attracts followers in Mecca. Now, the Quran is the written and direct and unchangeable word of God. He records his revelations received during the visions, and it is absolutely committed to writing in 650 CE, which is after Muhammad's death, but he started it before he died. However, it's not officially finished and in its current state until 650. Now, the tradition of Muhammad's life is called the Hadith. Okay, and we're going to start having some problems in Mecca. Now, Muhammad's monotheistic religion is very offensive to the polytheistic pagans. They find it as a complete alternative. As we see, when a monotheistic religion comes in, the polytheistic or the consistent religion is going to be opposed. It creates an economic threat, which is challenging the religious industry of Mecca, which is supporting the polytheistic gods. And it's a denunciation of greed, was directly in conflict with the aristocracy. Now, the Hijra is when Muhammad flees Medina in 622, and this is year 0 for the Muslim calendar. He leaves Medina running for his life. However, he organizes the people in order to create a communal society, which is called the Ummah. Now, he creates a legal spiritual code, which will be the basis of future laws for Islam, as well as he allows raids on Meccan caravans in order to raise money for the Ummah. So he's condoning violence against non-Muslims in order to support the Muslims. So it's an interesting thing that we'll see come into play later. Now, the seal of the prophets. Now, Muhammad is the final prophet. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all have overlapping belief systems. They accepted the authority of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, that they are prophets, but essentially Muhammad is the final prophet. Christianity and Judaism is held in high esteem, and Muhammad had been entrusted with more information than the previous prophets, so he's given more insight. Allah favored him the most, which is why he gets more information than the other. Now, Muhammad is eventually going to head back to Mecca in 630, and he is going to attack Mecca with violence. However, he converts Mecca to Islam, and he starts destroying all of the pagan sites and replaces them with mosques in order to worship the god Allah. One of these pagan sites is called the Kaaba, which was the major religious focus of the pagan religion prior to Islam. What we see is that Muhammad is going to take what the Kaaba stood for paganism and bleed it into what he uses for Islam, a very common practice that was done in both Islam and Christianity, and it is now approved as a pilgrimage site. Now, this is what the Kaaba looks like. I have better pictures of it, so I'll give you some more information about that. Now, the 5 pillars of Islam are based on no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. You have to pray 5 times a day. You must fast during Ramadan. You must do charity or almsgiving, and you must make a pilgrimage to Mecca or a Hajj. Now, Muslims that pray, they pray 5 times a day. We will see. I've got a couple of video clips of prayer and for Islam. And now, Jihad is called the struggle of Islam. It's against vice. It's against ignorance of Islam. And a holy war is against unbelievers who threaten Islam. Now, you're going to hear a lot of jihad spoken about on the news just because of all of this conflict with ISIS going on right now. The original is, keep in mind, Muhammad waging war against Mecca and reconquering Mecca in order to make it the Islamic center of the world. Now, while Muhammad is out at Medina and setting up the Ummah, he starts a codification of Islamic law, which is called the Sharia, which is still around today. It is based on the Quran and it has logical schools of analysis and extends beyond the ritual law to all areas of human activity. So it's not just about religion, it's the integration of religion and government. Now, the Sharia is going to be the common denomination between all of these Islamic countries. Now, the Caliph is going to be the leader, both political and religious leader of Islam. Now, Muhammad dies unexpectedly, and he does not lead a successor. So, Abu Bakr is chosen to lead as Caliph, and he leads a war against villagers who abandon Islam after the death of Muhammad. So we're going to see this will become a future trend. Now, the expansion of Islam is going to be one of his big goals, and he is very successful attacking the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid territories. However, he does have difficulties governing this rapidly expanding empire, which is going to grow very quickly under him. Now, the expansion of Islam, as you know from your map, which I'm assuming most of you did on Friday, you can see that the empire grows incredibly expansive, which makes it understandable why they had such a hard time governing the empire. Now, the Shah are going to be the next big conflict. Now, the disagreements over the selection of caliphs, Ali passed over for Abu Bakr. He's going to serve as caliph from 556 to 661, then assassinate along with most of his followers. Now, this is going to cause a divide in the church, in the religion, and we're going to start seeing Shiites and Sunnis, which is Shiite means they are going to formulate their own party, and the traditionalists are going to be Sunni. Sunni believe that the descendants should only be Muhammad's descendants, the caliphs, and the Shiite believe the most qualified should be. Okay, so the Umayyad Dynasty is going to be our first truly powerful Muslim empire. Now, from the Meccan merchant class brought the dynasty is going to be focused on. It brought stability to the Islamic country, and the capital is going to be Damascus, associated with Arab military. Now, the policy towards conquered peoples is going to be very kind to a degree. Now, favoritism of Arab military rulers causes discontent. Limited social mobility for non-Arab Muslims. They had to pay a head tax on non-Muslims, which means if you were not a Muslim, you had to pay tax. And the Umayyad luxurious living causes further decline in moral authority, which means because they like to live in a big, very kind of gaudy style, you're going to see that moral decay is going to happen at a faster rate. So eventually, they're going to be overthrown, and the Abbasid Dynasty are going to take over. Now, Abu Abbas and a Sunni Arab allied with the Shia and other non-Muslims. They seized control over Persia and Mesopotamia, and eventually they defeat the Umayyad army in 750, and they invited Umayyads to banquet, then massacred them, which is one of the more interesting tidbits of history. So, what was the Abbasid dynasty like? It was a diverse culture, nature of administration. You didn't have to be Arab. You could have been anything, as long as you were intelligent enough to be in position. They did have a military component, but they were not really warriors. They weren't trying to take over territory. They were just trying to maintain. They created the Dar al-Islam, or the House of Wisdom, which is going to be leading huge academic changes and lead to an educational reawakening, as well as the growth of military activity of autonomous Islamic forces. Now, the Abbasid Administration is going to be a Persian influence. It's going to be held court in Baghdad, and it's going to have a massive influence on scholars, mostly Islamic, but those Islamic scholars are going to influence the world. Now, the Umayyad and the Qadis sought to develop based on the Quran and the Sharia possibility. However, we're going to see things change. Now, at the high point of the Abbasid Dynasty, you're going to see Caliph Harun al-Rashid. He uses Baghdad as center of commerce, and it has great cultural activity, and this is at its peak. Well, eventually, as all good things come to a decline, we're going to see the Abbasid are brought down because of civil war between the sons of Harun al-Rashid trying to take power. We're also going to see provincial governors assert regional independence, so we're breaking down into smaller kingdoms, dissenting sects, and we're going to have extremists, and the Abbasid caliphs become puppets of Persian nobility, so they're not going to be as unique. And later, Seljuk Turks influence Sultan real power, all behind the throne. Now, the economy of the early Islamic world is going to be the spread of food and industrial crops, trade routes from India to Spain. You're also going to start having influence of Western diet adapts to a wide variety of goods. So the West is going to start influencing this Muslim empire. You're also going to see new crops that are going to be adopted to the Muslim empire, which is going to increase its ability to govern because it's going to make it more strong. Agricultural sciences are going to develop, so we're making even better technology, as well as cotton, paper industries are going to develop, and major cities are going to emerge on a much more regular basis. Now, when we talk about the Muslim Empire, you have to talk about the formation of the Hemispheric trading zone. What that means is that they are going to be starting a hemispheric trading with the whole Asian continent. So it starts with the Dar al-Islam, which is going to encompass all the silk routes, ice exported from Syria to Egypt in summer in the 10th century. We have camels, we have maritime trade. All of these are going to lead to the Muslims dominating the Silk Road trading. Now, they're also going to dominate because they have the economic resources of things called banks. They are also going to create a scale of trade and cause the need to develop checks. Okay, the idea of credit is also a Muslim invention. Now, the great thing about the Muslim empire is because the uniformity of Islamic law makes it incredibly consistent and allows it to promote trade. Also, you're going to see joint ventures are very common, which allow businesses to thrive. The Muslim empire is going to be the wealthiest and most powerful empire in the world because of their ability to kind of all be on the same page. Now, Al-Andalus, he's located in Islamic Spain. He's a Muslim Berber who conquers North Africa and takes Spain in the early 8th century. He's allied with Umayyads but refuses to recognize the Abbasid Dynasty because he opposes the way they took power. And he forms his own caliphate, which tensions, but there is some interrelationship. So he decides to create his own caliph, and a caliph means you're both the religious as well as the political leader. Now, the interesting thing about Islam is that the introduction of Islam into this region is actually going to improve the status of women. It outlaws females killing babies. It also eliminates, it also gives women some wealth, as in women are able to collect dowries. However, the big problem is that male dominance is still going to be preserved with patriarchal descent. Polygamy is permitted, but not polyandry. Polyandry is when women have multiple husbands, by the way. And the veil begins adopted around the 8th century. So the idea of having a veil and covering your hair and covering all of this stuff is taken from Mesopotamia only in the 8th century. Now, the formation of the Islamic cultural tradition and the Islamic values is the uniformity of Islamic law and Dar al-Islam. So the House of Wisdom and its Sharia loads are going to establish a madras, or a consistent culture, and it demonstrates the importance of a Hajj, where everyone has to go to Mecca and pray in front of the Kaaba. Now, Sufi missionaries are going to speak. They're going to come in and they're going to be the more of the educational component of Islam, and they believe in mysticism. They have some tension with Orthodox Islamic theologians. However, they're very widely popular because they believe in the mysticism and the grandeur and the, glory of Allah in a more theatrical way. Anyway, we're going to see Al-Ghazali, who is a major Sufi thinker from Persia. He believes in the impossibility of intellectual apprehension of Allah. He doesn't understand why anyone would oppose. However, he does focus on devotion and mystical ecstasy instead. Now, the cultural influences of Islam is, for instance, Persia. We're going to have an administrative and governance of the Persian Empire. We're going to see a lot of literature. India is going to have the mathematics, the science, and the medicine. Hindi numbers, remember, 0. Greece is going to be pulled up, which is the philosophy, especially Aristotle. All of these things are going to be spread by Islam. And because of that, they become worldwide basics and foundations. So, that is Islam. Let's head straight into East India. Now, East India is going to have a lot of dynasties and a lot of information going on. Do the very best you can when you're filling out your spice chart this week. Keep in mind, I'm not looking for every single component to be filled out just because some of them are just not going to have a component or explained fully in each component. However, do the best you can. So the first empire we're talking this week is the Sui Dynasty. It's a regional kingdom that succeeded the collapse of the Han Dynasty. So the Han's fall and the Sui replace. Yang Jian, it consolidates power control of all of China and initiates the Sui Dynasty. So he's going to start massive building projects using military labor and conscripted labor. Now, one of his major building projects is the Grand Canal, which is intended to promote trade between North and South China. Okay, most Chinese rivers flow west to east. It does link a network of earlier canals and allows roads on either side, and it does increase trade significantly within China. Now, after the Sui, we have the Tang. Now, the Tang are going to come into power because of wide discontent over conscripted labor in the Sui dynasty. So the military favors of Korea prompt a rebellion, and we're going to see the emperors assassinated in 618, and the Tang dynasty is going to take over. So because of the conscripted labor, the amount of actual building projects, the people revolt, they assassinate the emperor, and ta-da, we have the Tang. Now, the Tang Dynasty is most famous leader is going to be Tang Taizong. Anyway, he murdered 2 brothers and thrust his father aside to take the throne. As you can see, he's a strong ruler. He built the capital of Chang'an. He believes in law and order, taxes, prices need to be low, and a more effective implementation of earlier Sui policies, like, for instance, conscripted labor and military use. However, he's not going to go to the extreme that the Sui did. Now, some of the major achievements of the Tang Dynasty are going to be transportation and communication. It's going to have a very extensive postal service and courier service, which we can see as a foundation that they adopted from the Persians. We're also going to see equal field system. 20% of land is hereditary ownership, while 80% of it is going to be redistributed according to a formula, depending on your family size and land fertility. So this plan is going to work well into the 8th century. However, corruption, of course, loss of land, and to Buddhist monasteries is going to throw this away. During the Tang Dynasty, Buddhism is really going to take off in China or in East Asia. So the Bureaucracy of Merit, what we're going to see, the Tang is going to create the Imperial Civil Service Examination. It believes it's looking at Confucian educational curriculum and using that as a baseline of who can be a bureaucrat and who cannot. Now, the most advanced through merit educational opportunities are widely available, but loyalty to the dynasty and system remained strong until the early 20th century. So you would take this test, the better you did on the test, the more government positions you would have. It's a very fair system. It's not just the wealthy are able to do it. Anyone can take the test. However, you do have to be educated behind, which is going to allow mostly just the wealthy to take the test. But we do have some lower socioeconomic people coming up and taking the test and earning a spot in the government. Now, the Tang military expansion in the foreign relations are going to attack Manchuria, Korea, Vietnam, and Tibet. One of the largest expansions of China in its entire history is during the Tang. Now, established tributary relationships or gifts that were required to be a part of, and China becomes known as the Middle Kingdom, and we have the invention of kowtow, which is a process of showing respect. So we can see that the Sui and the Tang dynasties are going to greatly expand throughout China. Now, the Tang is eventually going to decline, as all great empires do, because of governmental neglect and emperor obsessed with music and favorite concubine, which is always interesting to see how great men can be undone by women. Anyway, by 775, a rebellion under An Lashan, a formal military, he's going to capture Chang'an, but the rebellion is going to be crushed in 763. Nomadic, your mercenaries invited to suppress the rebellion are eventually just going to take it for itself, and Tang declines and continues and rebellions into the 9th century. The last emperor abdicates in 907. So the decline of the Tang is going to exist for quite some time, but once the Tang go down, the Song Dynasty replaces it. Now the Song Dynasty are going to come into play around the 900s, 960 to be exact, and they emphasize administration, industry, and education, the arts. Military is not a massive component, which we're going to see it becomes much, much smaller at this point. The direction of the first emperor, Song Taizong, is going to be a former military leader. He made emperor by troops, so he's well loved by his soldiers. And he instituted a policy of imperial favor for civil servants and expanded bureaucracy. What that means is that the harder you work for the government, the more you get for the government. Imperial favor for civil servants, the more you give in honor of civilians, the more you get back. Now, the Song Dynasty, as you know, because you completed your map, is going to be a pretty large size. It's not going to be huge, but it's of decent size. Now, but we will know that the Song weakness is the size of its bureaucracy. It's going to cause a heavy drain on the economy because it's going to take a lot of money to pay all those salaries. 2 peasant rebellions in the 12th century are going to cause huge problems, as well as internal inertia prevents reform of bureaucracy. So what that means is we're going to keep promoting people who probably don't always deserve it. Now, the civil service leadership of military is going to lack military training. They're going to be unable to contain nomadic attacks. So what we're going to see, the Song Dynasty is going to have a lot of attacks, and eventually they'll have to conquer the southern Song. Now, the agricultural economies of the Tang and the Song Dynasty are going to be based on the created Vietnamese fast-ripening rice, which has 2 crop yields a year, which is why China still to this day is so dependent on rice. Technology, iron plows, and the use of draft animals is only going to increase it. Soil fertilization, improved irrigation, water wheels, and canals. All of that is going to lead to more fertile crops and terrace farming. Now, the population growth is going to increase because of all these all these agricultural improvements. Effective food distribution as well as transportation is going to allow this to increase. Now, with the larger population, it's going to lead straight into urbanization, and Chang'an is the world's most populous city with 2 million residents living in this. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, the southern Song capital of Hangzhou is over 1 million. So we're going to have the most cities. We're going to have the densest cities here. Now, when we deal with social structure, it's going to be, of course, patriarchal social structure, which has an increased emphasis on ancestor worship. It's going to have elaborate grave rituals and extended family gatherings in honor of deceased ancestors, which we're going to see as an extension of feudal piety, as well as foot binding is going to become new. It increases the control of male family members over females because women cannot stand literally on their own. We're going to start seeing more. This is what a Chinese foot binding woman looks like. And you can see she is not very useful. It's about keeping women looking pretty but not effective. Now, other technologies we're going to see is porcelain, which are Chinaware, which is going to be a huge import on the Silk Road, is going to be developed during the Song. Increased iron production use due to use of coke, not coal, in furnaces, and agricultural tools and weaponry. Gunpowder is invented, as well as earlier printing techniques are refined. Movable type by this 11th century, which changes everything for education, and yet will complex ideographs make woodblock technique easier, and naval technology. Now, with all of these new inventions, we're going to see in the emergence of a market economy. What that means is letters of credit developed to deal with copper coin shortage, so primary notes and checks are also used, so we have paper being used as money for the first time. The development of independently produced paper money, it's not going to be as stable, and riots are when it's not honored, so it's obviously got a few kinks. Now, government claims monopoly on money production in the 11th century in order to help regulate it. Now, as China and the hemispheric economy increases, cosmopolitan nature of Chinese cities is going to increase as well. Chinese silk opens up trade routes, but increased local demands for imported luxury goods is also going to be of high demand. So not only are we selling a bunch of things to the Middle East, we're also the Chinese are trying to get goods in return as well. Now, because of all these trading, because of the porcelain, because of the silk, we're going to see a cultural change in Tang and the Song China. You're going to have a decline in the confidence of Confucianism after the Han Dynasty, so it's going to fall out of favor. We're going to see Buddhism is going to become more powerful and more influential. Christianity, Mahshanism, and Zoroastrianism, and Islam are also going to appear in China. However, it's still Buddhism is going to be the king, and clientele is primarily foreign merchant class who's going to follow along with these type of monotheistic religions. Now, Dunhuang is a Maoran Buddhism, especially popular in Western China. They're building Buddhist temples and libraries, and it's going to have economic success because converts are donating land holdings and money to them. It's going to have increased popularity through donations of agricultural produce to the poor. So they're giving food away to the poor, which makes them more liked. The more liked they are, the more attention they get. The more attention they get, the more followers they get. The more followers they get, the more land they get. So you can see how the cycle works. Now, Buddhism, although we think Buddhism and we kind of accept it in China, it was not always that well liked. Now, the conflicts with Chinese societies, Buddhism and Confucianism are both based on text. Buddhism is going to emphasize metaphysics, which means it's going to focus on the combination of many things, while Confucianism is going to focus on ethics and politics. So if you're doing what you're told, if you're following your parents and honoring your parents, then you're okay. Metaphysics is going to be, are you in sync with the world? Is the world working in unison? Are you opposing it? Aesthetic ideal is celibacy and isolation, while Confucianism is going to be procreation and faithful piety of honoring your elders. So we can see there's going to be a very strong difference between the two. Now, the different schools of Buddhism is going to appear because different people interpret the same information differently. Dharma is going to be translated as Tao, and Nirvana is translated as easily as Buddhists adapt to the Chinese culture. Now, the accommodation of family lifestyle, one son in monastery for 10 generations of salvation is going to be the motto. Chan school or Zen Buddhism is going to become popular in Pure Land school. Now, we're going to see that Buddhists are going to be persecuted. Taoist/Confucians persecuted support in the late Tang Dynasty, so they're going to start killing the Buddhists off. In 840s, begin systematic closure of Buddhist temples and expulsion. So if you're Buddhist, you can no longer come. Zoroastrians, Christians, and Macedonians as well are also going to be kicked out. So they're going to try to regulate the religions because Tang is going to want Confucian, which supports the government. Now, the economic motive or seizure of large monastic landholdings is going to be a positive thing for the government. Now, our Neo-Confucians are going to come around during the Song Dynasty, and they refrain from persecuting Buddhists, but favors Confucianism. So we're going to stop killing Buddhists during Neo-Confucianism. However, that doesn't mean we like them, but they are going to be influenced by Buddhist thoughts. Now, the big philosopher of Neo-Confucianism is Zhao X. Now, as we move and transition to China and Korea, the Sui Dynasty, which Tang armies withdraw, Korea recognizes Tang as empire, so the Tang and the Sui are going to be okay. The Sui are going to pay tribute to the Tang. It's technically a vassal state, but very independent. They're not only going to require them to pay money. However, they do depend slightly on each other. It's going to have a Chinese influence in Korean cultural persuasive. So we're going to see, really for the first time, Chinese culture is going to start influencing Korea. Now, China is also going to influence Vietnam, and the Vietnamese adaptation to Chinese culture is their technology. They're going to use their technology to accomplish things, but ongoing resentment at political dominion. They hate being controlled by China, so they're going to revolt and fight against it, and they're going to assert their independence against the Tang when it falls in the 10th century. So the Vietnamese like the technology of China but hate being ruled, so they're going to revolt and fight. And as soon as Tang Dynasty is over, they declare their independence. China and early Japan are going to be influenced. Chinese armies never invade Japan, yet Chinese culture is very persuasive. The imitation of the Tang administration under the Nara Japan is going to have a huge influence. They adopt Confucian and Buddhist teachings, yet they do have a retention of the Shinto religion, which is the traditional language of Japan. Now, the Heian Japan is a Japanese emperor who moves court to Heian, or Kyoto, which is a little more modern. Yet, emperor figurehead, real powers in hands of Fujian clan. Okay, it's a pattern in Japanese history. Weak emperor, power behind the throne. It helps explain longevity of the institution. So the emperor is just a figurehead, while the real power is all done by his lords and nobles behind the scenes. We're going to see the increase of Japanese literature with the influence of Chinese Kazan letters and classic curriculum dominated by Chinese and the Tale of Genji, which is going to be the first of all of the literature that's going to be circling around Japan. Now, the institution of the shogun is going to be around up until the 20th century. Because of a civil war between the Taira and the Minato clans in the 12th century, the Minato leaders named shogun take power in 1185, and they rule from Kamarata, which imperial throne from Kyoto. They're eventually going to be in power until about the 20th century. Now, medieval Japan, or Kamuka and Muchi, are going to be the periods. It's about decentralized power in the hands of warlords. Kind of like European feudalism, when we get to it, it's all about local kingdoms. The military authority is in the hands of the samurai or professional warriors. Essentially, if you're familiar with European standards or European feudalism, it's knights and vassals are the same thing as samurai. Now, the post-classical borders of China and Korea and Vietnam, as we can see, are very limited. That is it for this week, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll see you on Monday. Bye.